I decided, even though I have no family connections to Drahovich, since my specialty is Jewish genealogy in Galicia, I thought this would be a great opportunity to demonstrate, if you have no background information in genealogy, what is available to you. Because inevitably, the traces of a life can be found, contrary to what many people believe when they first start off. And the way and the reason I chose this particular topic, and this is the first lecture I've given on this, so it's brand new, is last summer, while I was at a conference here in Żydo, as a matter of fact, I was approached by the director of the Lviv Museum of Art because they have in their possession a Bruno Schultz drawing that has never shown up in any catalogs. But on the back side was a man's name, a Polish-Jewish man's name, Michał Hayes. And she asked me, as a genealogist with a specialty in Galicia, to please find out what could I learn about this man, Michał Hayes. And that's how it got started. Here's what the backside stamp looked like on the drawing. And that was the only clue that we had, except I believe she may have known that he was based in Krakow. But what happened to him and what happened to his family and what his connection was to Bruno Schultz and how we got the artwork was a mystery. Why did I take it? Because I got an interest in Galicia, fascination with Drahovich, and anybody who's aware of Drahovich-Borisław area will know that it's rich in not only oil, but in artists, writers, and Jewish heritage. I also love a challenge. I'm competitive, and I wanted to know what could I find with so little information of a family in a town that I don't even personally have a connection to. And in the process, what could I learn about the individual, and on the larger picture, the Jewish culture and population that existed there. And as it turns out, boy, I got quite the education on the broad picture typical of Galicia, as we will see. So of course, and I'd like to point out that I have listed all my sources on the slides. So for instance, here I've listed Jewish Records Indexing Poland, known as JRI Poland, and Stanley Diamond and Mark Halpern of JRI Poland have printed off, and I have brought and placed at the front brochures about JRI Poland, both in English and in Polish. And since it's one of the key resources I used for this, in addition to the Jewish Historical Institute, you may find it useful if you've not used their database before. So of course, what was the first thing I did? Drahovich belonged in the interwar period to Poland, and being part of Galicia, I'm knowledgeable what online resources there were, so I hit the online resources, and lo and behold, between a cadastral map that we have up in the map room of Gesher Galicia and the online database, without even leaving the comfort of my own home, I came up with a birth record for Michał Hayes, 1894, Drahovich. Birth record, of course, lists his parents, lists the synagogue, lists all kinds of interesting information that can be useful to me, and this is an example. Furthering in the same resource of JRI Poland, now that I have his parents' names, I can go backward. I got his parents' name from his birth record, now I can learn about them. I was able to get, as you see here, a marriage record in 1891. And from that, I found other children that would be, in this case, one sister and 3 brothers to Michał Hayes. These are their birth records. Again, I have not even left the comfort of my own home using the online databases. But it's important to recognize Regina, Meyer, Arnold, and Theophil. Meyer is the only one who passed away. So you've got Regina, Arnold, and Theophil, who are surviving siblings of Michał Hayes, and they come back to the story later. This gives you an idea of the location of Drahovich in case you're not familiar. Up here. And for those of you that do know the rich heritage it has that we will discover in a few moments, it was really the oil capital of Galicia. So as I mentioned, two things make Drohobych especially unique. Certainly oil. When you look at the population and census records, it's remarkable how fast the population grew once oil was discovered there. It also made it a critical capture point for the Germans, and they certainly had their eye on Drohobych, as we will come back to discover. Jews, by the way, were very, very well represented in the oil industry, not just as owners, but as management, and predominantly management, actually. But Ukrainians and Poles, of course, as well. And this gives you an example. In 1860, the town of Drohobych numbered only 500 people. By 1900, 12,000. So you're talking a huge explosion of families that relocated there for the opportunities that were presented. And by the way, there are several wonderful books out, and there's a Drohobych descendants group in Israel that was absolutely indispensable to a lot of my research. The other thing that makes Drohobych very, very rich in its history is the artists that came from there and the writers that came from there. Gottlieb, both Gottliebs, Lillian, and others, you can find their artwork not only exhibited here at the Jewish Historical Institute, but over at the Polin Museum and, of course, national museums as well. There. Bruno Schultz. Many people know him as a writer, but he was quite the artist in his own right as well. And again, that's what got me started on this particular project. So, what are some of the other resources I found? I have to tell you, a very, very uncommon resource that ought to be top of your list is what's known as genealogyindexer.org. You can see the website link right there. They have digitized thousands of Polish historic school books, military books, brochures, travel brochures, telephone books, business directories. It is almost always my second stop when I'm doing my own family research and research for others. And sure enough, in the 1926-27 Polish phone book, you can find information about the Hayes family, and they were, in fact, involved with oil and timber. This is just giving you some background. Of course, lumber and timber was a huge industry there as well in order to support the oil industry. And these are just some sample pictures of pre-war Jewish families provided, again, by the Drohobych Descendants Group in Israel. And what do I discover? I discover that Bruno Schultz himself was, of course, born in Drohobych. He was only 2 years older than Michał Hayes. I find out a little bit of information about what his mother does and where he studied, and there was quite a bit of crossover with Michał Hayes, so I start suspecting they probably knew each other at school. And sure enough, it turns out that I guess I didn't put a date on this, but it's in the 1920s, there was a group that was formed in Drohobych of predominantly Jewish students who were interested in art, music, and literature, and they formed this group, and information I found on the internet had Michał Hayes listed as one of the members. So here, I think, validates, they knew each other back in Drohobych. I'm guessing they also knew each other in school. And there were some other fairly well-known people that were a part of this group. That's a picture of the house as it exists today. Again, speculating, but I suspect Drohobych is the connection here, whether it's school or the Kahil group that they belong to. And sure enough, getting back to Genealogy Indexer, I mentioned that they've got school records. If you Poland, by the way, is by far the most and best represented of the records Genealogy Indexer has online, but almost every other country you can think of has records up as well, so if you have family roots elsewhere, it's worthwhile checking. And sure enough, 1912, in the Drohobych Gymnasium report, we have Michał Hayes. There is Pilpol, the one who formed the Drohobych group that we just looked at for the literary and artistic studies, 1911, so you can see they're all contemporaries. 1910, Bruno Schultz. All this stuff has been done from the comfort of my own home on this website. A wonderful resource a lot of people don't know about. Jagiellonian University put out a book that you can buy if you can find it, of Jewish students who attended Jagiellonian University. I have given entire lectures on this topic because most Jewish genealogists aren't even aware this book exists. The first half of the book is statistical information. The second half, lists, alphabetical lists. What do you learn? You learn where they studied, what their grades were, where they studied before they went to Jagiellonian University, what year they graduated. And with that information, you can write to Jagiellonian University archives and get their student records. Some of those records, by the way, have information where they went on to. That's how I discovered my family went from Jagiellonian University with a few to Buscadroy and then to Israel. And they also have sometimes student photographs, a fantastic resource. Again, more from Genealogy Indexer. Here's some more business telephone and address books. Memoirs and historical accounts. This is where those of you working, interviewing descendants and survivors, this is something you may not find on the internet, but you can get information from other families from those towns. So if there is a town group that has been formed or a descendants group, by all means reach out to them. I reached out, and sure enough, I found that there was a memoir written by one of the big Drohobych families, Lauterbach, which, by the way, about a month ago, I was put in touch with Alex Lauterbach, who lives about a mile from my mother in Los Angeles. He's 92 years old, and it was his father who wrote this book. And he happened to be on the internet, and he saw that I was going to be giving this lecture, and he contacted me. So we have a new, I've now put him in touch with other members of the Drohobych Descendants Group, and he up until now had no idea this Descendants Group even existed, and it has 600 surviving members. And in this memoir, I discovered that my Michał Hayes served in the Polish Army during World War I. I also got the name of his wife that he eventually marries, and this is important because she will be, together they have a daughter, and that daughter does survive the war, and that daughter had a daughter, and she lives in Australia, and I've now connected with her as well, and she helped provide a lot of these records. Again, going to Genealogy Indexer, I can see where Michał Hayes was living in 1925, a married man with his family. 1929, I find out he's gone back to Drohobych. He's got a law degree now from Jagiellonian. He opens a practice there. And his sister, Regina, who we saw previously, now is living in the same address in Krakow that Michał has just moved from. I'm running through this really quickly because I got a lot of slides. Again, using this wonderful book from Jagiellonian University, I was interested to see that Regina's daughter, Romana, who, by the way, does survive the war, also studied at Jagiellonian in the same department as her uncle, Michał Hayes. And now I find Hayes, as I mentioned, in Drohobych, and here's proof of it in the 1938 Polish judicial calendar. Again, you can find a Genealogy Indexer. This is the last year that the family is still intact. Who's also there at that time? Bruno Schultz, professor at the local gymnasium. Those of you that know Sławomir Grunberg, the filmmaker, his father was in this class, by the way, and is in one of these photographs. This is a pretty interesting thing because it turns out that Bruno Schulz did try and get a visa to leave Poland, by the way. He was traveling around Europe at the time. He had shows in Paris and elsewhere. And only within the last 6 months, Lviv State Archive as a source came up with this passport visa application for him with a photograph. Probably the most famous photograph of him. Of course, war comes in '39. Nazis invade Drohobych. Drohobych, like many towns in Galicia, including my town of Rohatyn, goes back and forth, both in World War I and II, between being German-occupied and Russian-occupied. Not good for the local population, of course. And Michal's widowed sister, Regina, that we were just talking about, whose daughter was going to Jagiellonian, she heads, sadly, first to Warsaw, then to Lviv, and then she's deported. But the deportation actually saves her, which, for those of you that have family research you've been doing, you've probably encountered this, that those that did get deported east ended up perhaps surviving. Yes, okay. Anyway, to run through it, I have various information about what happened to him during the war. Michal served time in a camp. Jewish Historical Institute, thank you very much, helped me find some records showing him, in fact, being on the list of prisoners. 41, Drohobych gets taken. The ghetto, of course, is a horrible situation. For those of you that know the Bruno Schulz story, it's a sad one. He's walking home. He had been protected by a German, and anyway, a rival German shot him down. I'm getting the hurry up, you got 5 minutes, so I'm going to zip through this. This is what happens to the highest family, one by one. As part of the research, I discover that Michal's wife ends up in the huge, huge mass grave that's outside of Drohobych, where 11,000 Jewish Drohobych and Borisław Jews were shot down. Michal Hayes, at the end of the war, comes back to Krakow. He learns about the death of his wife. He's been in a camp, and he joins his daughter. Again, I'm finding, with the help of the descendants, what happens to the daughter. She survives, she marries, she goes to Paris. And our Michal Hayes remarries. In fact, he marries 2 more times before the end of his life, and he's back in Krakow. He officially starts becoming a collector of artwork. We're finally back to what got me started on this. And it turns out that he was focusing on Galician Jewish painters and artists. So he became quite the collector in Krakow of this. Unfortunately, to support himself after the war, a lot of his artwork got liquidated. Some of the artwork ended up here at the Jewish Historical Institute, fortunately, and that's why they were absolutely instrumental in my research. And also through their help, I got to look through their file on him, and sure enough, one of the sad cases, he made application to the Joint Distribution Committee for money. They bought a few pieces of artwork from him. They in turn donated them to other institutions back here in Warsaw, and that was one way of them helping Holocaust survivors. Sadly, he also, by the way, and they've got prices on the back of the artwork files, what he was paid, in many cases not very much. And sadly, he even tried to emigrate to Sweden, but at this point he's a man in his 50s, and despite having a law career, Sweden turned him down. So he again is liquidating his collection. Thank you again to the Jewish Historical Institute, because this is where they were absolutely indispensable in my research. More information where he moved to. He marries his 3rd wife. She's from Lviv, which I find very interesting. And he passes away, and he's buried at the Jewish cemetery in Krakow on Miodowa. Again, a lot of this information was discoverable on the internet. His sister as well is in Miodowa. Now the rest of the family, was not so lucky. His brother Arnold, shot and killed in Stri. If you have a Drohobych connection or a Borisław connection, tight connection to Stri. If you don't find records in Drohobych or Borisław, check Stri. Nearby. Son and daughter executed there as well. Other brother, Teofil, judge. I mean, this is a family, lawyers, judges, judicial representatives. Also, one of the members of one of those who ended up in the mass grave outside of Drohobych. His wife, deported to Belzec. His daughter, to several camps, one of which was a laboratory camp. She probably had medical experiments. I wasn't able to establish that for sure. Other daughter survives, and this is the family, if I recall, that goes to Australia. So, what did I learn? When and how did he acquire the drawing? I don't know. I didn't, but I did learn an awful lot of interesting things about the family. Why he got it. The drawing, by the way, today is in a private museum in Israel. I can't say, actually. I've been asked not to say. It has not been shown in public. Again, here's the stamp that's on the back. So what is that drawing, and what does it look like? This is it. There have now been a number of articles written on this particular drawing, and there's a movement. It will likely now be officially included in the catalog of all his works. There is some damage, as you can see in the center, a couple of small holes. Nobody knows exactly what caused that. And this is the people I wish to thank, the Jewish Historical Institute and the grandson, who I'm going to have dinner with in a week in Israel. And here's the descendants group. Again, 600 members, 60 original survivors. That's it. I hope I helped a little.